Hello and welcome to Questions for the Chief for September. Chief, we had quite a few this time, so we'll just jump right into it. First one, Chief, with the integration of ESO into the UFA over a year ago, I'd like to think that the department as a whole has the ins and outs of the system down. However, it seems depending on the medic, captain, sometimes trainers, the way we are supposed to do reports changes so often. I know in the beginning there were a lot of growing pains with the new system, and there still are at times, but I was hoping that you and the EMS division could give some direction on the expectations of when to do a report and not. What is the difference between a patient and a person on scene? Are we supposed to be doing one report for both units, or should each unit do a report on every call? Is there any chance that the department can or will be moving to a tablet, ideally iPad, since ESO is so tablet friendly, and get away from the bulky laptops? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give it to Rob Ayers to answer, and he's got a bunch of information.
Okay.
So.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is good questions. There's a bunch of different parts to it, so I'm going to try and break it down and kind of go through the individual questions one by one. The first part of the question, if we could provide some direction on expectations of when to do a report and when not to. So the answer to this question is written in our policy, and our policy is created specifically to meet state administrative rule requirement. So I'm going to actually just go through the policy and read what the policy says, and then I'll read through the rule as well. Not the whole rule, just this section of it. So in section 1.0, this is the Electronic Health Records Policy 500.070. Section 1.1, an EHR must be initiated and completed by a UFA patient care provider on all calls for EMS service to which a UFA apparatus or EMS provider responds. This includes some standby assignments, but does not include animal rescue or clearly non-medical reports. So I think, to me, that's pretty clear. Obviously, for some people, that's not quite as clear. There's some definitions for what those mean at the beginning of the policy. So it defines an EMS call for service. And this relates to the state administrative rule. So I'm going to read from that as well. And this is what's required of UFA through essentially a state law that says EMS providers will do fill in the blank. This is Rule R911-7-1, which is the Emergency Medical Services Pre-Hospital Data System Rule. And this states in Section 2, each EMS provider shall submit data to the department electronically in the NEMSIS format for every dispatch instance, regardless of patient disposition. So I think, to me, what this means, our policy and the rule, is that any time we are responding to any call that could be a medical call, we need to have a report, and it must be submitted to the state.
Now, the other part of that question was just asking about tablets and iPads. Back before we purchased the current GTACs, we had a work group together. This group vetted tablets, our reporting system, and where we landed was ESO and then these GTACs. So it's been vetted. They checked all the boxes, met our needs. No plan to change those. We're going to continue to stay with GTACs as our hardware for that reporting.
Okay.
Well, Rob, there was a couple other things in here. What's the difference between a patient and a person on scene? And that seems to me that it should be quite clear what a patient is versus a person on scene. Am I missing something there?
Yep. No, you are correct. And so again, this goes back to the definitions in our policy. So we've defined a patient and a person, and this is pretty common across the country. This is how states and agencies define who needs to have a report completed. So for a patient, a medical patient, you need to do a report. For a person, you don't. And in our policy, again, we have patient defined on that first page. And I think one thing that is by design written into the definition is that a patient is an individual encountered by EMS personnel who demonstrate a possibility or a known illness or injury. So you don't necessarily have to, be having some medical problem, but there is a possibility that you could be having a medical problem, and that's why you activated the 911 system. Kind of a point to make on this is if we need to do an assessment on someone to determine if they have a medical problem, or if they could have a medical problem, that person is a patient, period.
Yep. Okay. And then are we supposed to be doing one report for both units, or should each unit do a report on every call?
So our training and direction, and I think the policy and guidelines that we've had over the last couple of years since we've had ESO, in general, what we want to say is that you as an EMS provider should be documenting what you did on a call and on a scene. There's no requirement that we have every unit who responds to an incident complete their own report. That is not a state requirement. We could put that requirement into place. We actually used to. Several years ago, we had a requirement that every unit had their own documentation. That's not a requirement right now, but it is very important and a lot of reasons for people to document what they did. So if you're on the engine, you get there 5 minutes before the ambulance does. You've done an assessment probably. Maybe you've done some vitals. Maybe you have even started an IV. You're the one who did that. You should be documenting that on your EHR. Don't let the ambulance be required to document what you did before they were even on scene. This is somewhat complicated because of the NEMSIS dispositions, and we had that change back in November from version 3.4 to version 3.5. So the dispositions are basically like a category of what happened on the call. So did we provide care? Did we release the patient? Did we transport the patient? There has been some confusion related to the new dispositions because the structure is very different than it was in the past. Brooke did go out and provide that training throughout the department about, she provided a ton of scenarios. This is when 1 would be better, 2 would be better. My overall recommendation is if there's any question about whether you're going to do the report or another apparatus is going to do the report, you should probably be doing your own report. What I did do very recently, actually, we'd been talking about it for a while and it never actually happened, but since we got the question, I made the effort and I actually put those PowerPoints and those scenarios up on the support.unifiedfire.org website. So if you go into that Solutions Center and if you just search for NEMSIS 3.5, it'll show all of the scenarios that Brooke went through when she did the training. And it has pretty clear scenarios. If this happens, then these are what your dispositions should be. So that hopefully is really helpful. Also, you can put in a request if you'd like more, some additional training. We're happy to come out and provide that to crews at any time to help you determine how to complete the reports and whether or not 1 or 2 should be good.
Okay. And I want to go a little deeper on this, kind of medical related, but not so much question related. But I had a station visit last week, and they were telling me that some of the stuff that they were being taught by Dr. BZ didn't match protocol. And we had a conversation about that, and the protocols are being caught up, right? But you mentioned that support ticket system is in place for medical. So if there's a discrepancy somewhere, or they want more training, more hands-on training, they can put in a ticket and you can respond and hopefully fill that need, right? So do you want to talk a little more about that?
Yep. Yeah, that would be great. That was a great example. I think there was just some confusion probably. In my mind, it was probably more of a training issue than it was a protocol issue. We are certainly happy to receive that feedback. If there is a protocol out there, we've got, between protocols and medication references, I think we've got about 70 documents out there that we've been trying to update on a regular basis. So if we miss something, if the training's not matching up, we would love to know about it. And I think that is going to provide a kind of a singular location or opportunity for people to say, hey, I'm seeing this and I'm hearing that. Is the protocol wrong? Do we need more training? They can put in a request through that website, support.unifiedfire.org. They can put in a request and we'll come out and do training. Or, we are certainly not perfect in all the documents that we put together. We've got a lot of them. And so if we miss something, we would like to know about it. This would be a great opportunity to make sure that doesn't fall through the cracks for us.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Rob. All right, Chief. Well, now we have a couple ops-related questions. So here are those. Chief, currently our daily paramedic staffing requires 35 medics per day, with that number increasing to 36 with the addition of Medic Ambulance 107. With 3 platoons that require 108 paramedics, we currently have 111 paramedics, excluding day workers and medics of other specialties. With 34 medics being mandatoried in June and 30 in July, we don't have enough paramedics to meet our staffing needs. My first question is, how many total paramedics do we need to adequately staff our stations? My second question has to do with your plan to adequately staff our department with paramedics. The plan, as it was with Chief Peterson, remains that we need to hire more paramedics. With that plan currently being inadequate, are you considering other solutions, like changing our paramedic response? And if not, why? Thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm going to have Dusty answer this question, and I'll chime in where I need to.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Chief. So just some updated numbers. I think probably we had some medics get licensed after this question was submitted. So this person is close on the numbers, but we have 116 people that are paramedics today in operations at that paramedic rank. That's 39, 39, and 38 medics by A, B, and C shift, respectively. And we need 34 medics a day right now to meet our minimum staffing, and that'll go to 35 January 1st, 2025 with putting Medic Ambulance 107 into service. Our current multiplier we use is 3.76. So when that's applied, we need 128 medics in total. So we're just down a little bit from that. But for the last several years, we've bumped that medic minimum to, we're shooting for 44 paramedics per shift. Paramedics unique. It's the only position in the organization we can't act into. We have to have a licensed provider. So we've increased where we want to be with that multiplier to help manage those vacancies. Today we have 8 firefighters in paramedic school that have started this fall that'll be graduating in the spring. And then we're looking at another 5 firefighters that'll be attending paramedic school in the spring of 2025. So they'll get done about this time next year. So we've got paramedics in the pipeline. We're hiring some medics here and there. We're getting some medics on lateral. So we are trying to increase those numbers. As for the second question, are we willing to change our response plan or where we have medics? And I think, yes, we are. But in doing that, we have to meet our needs and check some boxes. And so with that, we have to maintain the same level of service and coverage. We can't decrease that. We have to keep our ALS response with only 2 units on an ALS call. One of the issues we had years ago before we changed our response model is we would have multiple heavy apparatus and ambulances responding to get the right amount of personnel and licensed providers on those incidents, and that's an impact to our overall coverage. We have to integrate with all of our partner agencies, and this model currently insulates us from any changes that they may make. So whether an agency decides to have 2 medics on an ambulance or 1 medic or 1 on their heavy or whatever they come up with, we always have a good response going, and it integrates well with our partners. We have to be able to manage any sort of staffing model or response model in the CAD. And so that can be difficult to manage if we change things too much. And then we don't want to require any certain rank to be on the ambulance every shift. Working ambulance shifts are hard. You're often running a lot of calls. We want to provide other opportunities, let people develop on heavy apparatus, all those types of things. So there's a lot of good that comes out of that rotation that we have now with our current response model. I am getting the medical response advisory group back together this month. We'll have our first meeting at the end of the month. The primary reason is to reconvene this group to look at a proposal to look at bringing on a community response unit. That the primary intent of that is to respond with an ambulance on low acuity calls, or what we believe are low acuity calls, to help to start buffering some of the heavy apparatus. As we see our response numbers grow, and just looking at some of the data, it could be a good response model for us in the future. and that would be a BLS unit. But we'll be working through that AMRAG group for that. Once we sort through that, I want to be able to be prepared to make a budget ask. I'm willing to talk through our current staffing, our current response, and all those types of things with this group again, and we can have that discussion and evaluate that. One thing of note is, that we're short paramedics, but really truly we're short paramedics in the paramedic rank. Looking at our overall organization, we have 66 paramedics that are captains. We have 24 paramedics that are either engineers or techs. So there's a lot of medics out there in operations. It's just how we're able to use those personnel to fill some of these seats. So there are options. There's things we can look at, but they got to check those boxes for us.
Yeah, and I have a little bit to add. That it says your plan, as well as Chief Peterson's plan, was to hire more medics. With that plan currently being inadequate, will I consider other solutions? And what I think is important to say is that there's a shortage of medics in the country, not only just in Utah, right, or in UFA. So my plan is to hire firefighters and train them to be medics, and we're doing that. We're sending as many as we can a year, currently between 10 and 15 a year, to go to medic school and then come back and work for us as medics. So I think that we've tried over the last couple of years to do laterals and get medics, and we're getting a handful here and there, but that's not as effective as sending a group of 15 from our organization to a school to go to become a medic. So to me, that's a little bit of a shift. I don't think it's inadequate. I think that we've had some success in getting medics here through those processes. We've had success sending them to school. But to your point, there are other things that we could do before we look at the staffing model and making those changes. And to me, knowing that we're sitting on about 80 medics out there that aren't being used as medics is something that we need to talk about. I mean, I think that that's an option for us to look at if this becomes too much of a burden. The staffing model would be the second thing that I would look at and see if there's a way to better operate with fewer medics on a shift per day. And then the third option is, like what we've talked about, enacting the COOP and running short, right? Those are kind of my ways of looking at this if this burden becomes too heavy. And I think the important thing to know is that we are doing everything we can to hire more people. We just heard today that fire training is going to do 3 back-to-back camps starting in October. So they're going to do a camp, graduate them, start another camp, graduate them, and then do a lateral camp. So from October to essentially August, they are going to be running recruits through. And that's a ton of people that we're going to be able to bring on. I'm anticipating about 50, 55 people that we're going to be bringing on. So we're doing what we can to get more people here. But the recruitment for paramedic school just went out, and the numbers were down. So what can we do to get people to go to medic school? The more people that go, the more that burden is shared amongst everybody. But if everybody's looking at that paramedic rank and saying, I don't want to be a medic, it's going to make that rank worse, because that's the rank that's hit the most heavily with mandatory. So I encourage everyone to go to medic school if they haven't. Give it a try.
Yeah, Chief, and good point. We are down a little bit this year for that registry. Part of that could be that we've required the prerequisites to get onto the registry. So if you haven't got your prerequisites done, get that going, get them completed, be ready for next year.
Yep, and that change was made as well, that the prereqs are 100% covered by tuition reimbursement. So just go do it. There's no barrier in front of you to go take those classes and be ready for medic school and help us out.
Okay. Next ops question. Chief, with the recent mandatory conversation that happened, it appears that this is a situation we are going to be in, especially paramedics, for the foreseeable future. This obviously is a necessary evil to fulfill our mission to the communities we serve. With that said, I don't believe it is fair in any way to work a mandatory shift for straight time. I realize that you changed the overtime for everything recently in order to wrangle in sick time usage. That is understandable. What is not acceptable to me is forcing someone into a mandatory shift for straight pay. We have long pay periods. A lot of things can happen within the length of our time cards. This makes using sick leave a large gamble when you are facing a mandatory shift within that range. Is it still extra money? Yes, however, something about coming in on a day when you planned not working is even more of a kick to the turnout pants for straight pay. Do you have any power to make this change for the mandatory personnel? I fully understand that there may be outliers that will use some backdoor method to use this to their advantage in some way. But let's hold those individuals accountable, not the masses.
Yeah, and I don't know if Dusty has anything to add on this one, but I feel like we've answered this one many times, and we did look at it really closely, especially when I made that change to not include sick leave as time worked when calculating overtime. The two main reasons: one, we have to look at leave in the same way, so funded leave versus unfunded leave. And funded leave is vacation and holiday. Unfunded is sick, military, and funeral or bereavement. So we have to consider those in the same buckets. So sick leave, unfortunately, is an unfunded liability, and that's how we calculate it. The other reason is that it would be, with our old payroll system and our new payroll system, a manual entry to make that happen, and we just do not have the capacity to do that without hiring more staff to make it happen. So for those two reasons, we decided to keep it as the way that it is. And I do want to remind everybody that in a lot of organizations, time not worked does not count as time worked when calculating overtime. So I think that we're lucky in the sense that we have holiday and vacation counting as time worked when calculating overtime. That's how it was when I grew up. It was anything, if you weren't at work, it didn't count as work. And so if you had vacation or holiday in around, you would have to work that many more hours to get overtime. And so I think it's a benefit that we have it the way it is. And I'm, it's unfortunate that sick leave falls into that unfunded category, but that's how it is.
All right, Chief, our next question. I had a few questions for the Chief if they could be addressed at some point. Thanks. And this is a three-parter, Chief, so we'll go one by one here.
Okay.
Software audit. Has UFA ever conducted a software audit? Are there any records maintained as far as what we use on an annual basis? If not, an annual audit would help in removing unnecessary programs and potentially consolidating applications that we use. This could help in the onboarding process for new employees. Having an overview of the different programs that we can use can also help in the annual budget process so that employees, elected officials, and the public understand where funds are going and for what purpose.
So you want to answer that one now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Casey's here to answer that, and I'm impressed with this question. It's like they're starting to think about how to become more efficient and how do we save money, and so I'm excited that this type of thought is happening out there, and we've got Casey ready to answer.
Yeah. So first, I just want to thank the person for this question. To answer this person's question exactly, yes, we have an inventory of software and subscriptions that UFA uses, Chief. This list is reviewed annually during the budgeting process. Any new software must be added to this list so that a budget can be allocated. So we're not just out there subscribing to things, whenever we feel like it. And some software has been denied until the next year's budget becomes available. As I mentioned before, we align with the security framework of CIS controls. Within that framework, CIS control number 2 is labeled Inventory and Control of Software Assets. A description of this control states that we must actively manage, inventory, track, and correct all software, operating systems, and applications on the network so that only authorized software is installed and can execute, and that unauthorized and unmanaged software is found and prevented from installation or execution. And that's a big part of our security profile, is aligning to these CIS controls. But that's only the first step. The next step is that once we find an inventory of our software, we can now start to look at duplicate functionality. Specifically, we reduced our use of Zoom as Teams provides the same service. So what I did was I compared our Microsoft Office licenses with the users that had Zoom licenses, and we removed Zoom licenses and said, hey, you need to start using Teams. And that budget savings was seen last year, and we'll see additional savings this year.
Anything that goes through the budgetary process has to be vetted by you as the IT manager if it deals with technology. So people can't just sign up for stuff. Division leaders can't sign up for something without putting it in the budget and having you vet it. So everything, every software subscription out there that we have, or at least you're getting to that point to where you learn it all and know it all, and you have control over that.
Yes.
So I feel good about that.
Okay. All right, Chief, the next question's mine. It's about website maintenance. How often is the website updated? Who is responsible for maintaining it? I noticed there are some pages with outdated information that are more than a year old. It would be great to have the website on an update schedule, if it's not already, so we can provide the latest information to everyone. So to answer that, yes, it is on an update schedule. However, we have very finite resources. We have a consultant that helps us with major updates, but very limited amount of money, about $5,000 a year. So we save that till we need to overhaul a section or something like that. And then Courtney, in his spare time, which isn't a lot, takes care of the rest of the maintenance for the site. So we go through as a team at our staff meeting, and we'll go through once a month and look for the things that need updated. But what I've told him is to focus on the areas that have the most traffic, because we have limited time, limited resources. The ones that get the most traffic are where our employees click. So they use it a lot for the kind of that central clearinghouse of links. So we try to keep that as updated as possible. So there are things that do get out of date, and they're the things that get just like a handful of clicks every month. We want to keep them updated. So if you see something like that, they can send it to us, and then Courtney puts it in the queue to get updated. But we do go through it, and we're scrubbing it almost weekly, looking for those things. It's a big site, though.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I think you've tried to simplify it over the last couple of years, right? When it was built, it was pretty complicated, and there was a lot of hidden pages, and you could get to pages from multiple different ways. And that's oftentimes hard to keep track of, and so you simplified that. And the forward-facing pages that get clicked a lot should be up to date. Yep. And there are a couple of those lower interest pages that just maybe haven't got to yet.
Yep, exactly. So once a month we look at the data and just say, where are people going? And it's pretty consistent over the last few years.
Yep.
So we definitely focus our resources to keep those things updated. Okay, third question. Grants management. Are we looking into hiring a grants manager? Having an employee dedicated to grants would help in applying for additional funding opportunities for all departments at UFA, especially for existing employees that wear multiple hats and don't always have the bandwidth.
Yeah. We did look at this last year as part of the budget process. It kind of came in a little later than I would want in the process, so we didn't have a ton of time to really get our ducks in a row. It's very challenging to add an FTE as part of the budget process. So what I did for this one was I asked a couple of division leaders that would have opportunity to write grants to come together and see if they could cost share this position and see what it would look like. Maybe, in theory, a grants manager would pay for themselves with the amount of money that they're able to find and write grants for and receive. Since we were on a shorter timeline, we didn't quite get that together the way that I wanted in order to present it to the board to ask for another FTE. This year we have more time, and I'm looking at doing that again. I can't say that it's going to make it to the top of prioritization when the budget comes around, because I don't know. Of course, top 3 is going to be my number one priority. Looking at adding a couple other positions in there, with this being one of them right now. But I would like to have those division leaders that write grants frequently come to me with a good proposal on that I feel comfortable presenting to the board, and then we'll ask for it.
Okay, Chief, here's another one. Hi, Chief. Recently, myself and my crew have responded to medical calls in which the patient and family did not speak English. This month alone, our crew has responded on 2 Bosnian-speaking families, 1 Swahili-speaking family, and 1 Farsi-speaking family. With Salt Lake seeing a high number of refugee immigrants, there is going to continue to be an increasing number of non-English speaking individuals. There is obviously a disconnect when unable to speak the patient's native language and can ultimately lead to a poor quality of care delivered. Obviously, we can use Google Translate. However, this involves using personal phones and is still a cumbersome way to thoroughly assess a patient. At previous agencies I have worked for, they have all utilized HIPAA-compliant translating services provided to us via a phone number we could call and connect with an operator who connects you with the language you need. You can then have a conversation through a speakerphone with your patient and the translator. Is such a service something on your radar, or does the department have plans for how to address such issues?
Right now, it's not so much on my radar. I've got Wade here to answer it in a little more detail, but in the last couple of years, I've been on station visits, and they were asking me if we would consider paying a stipend if there was a language spoken other than English that we could use, right? And we've talked about it a couple of different times, and have just felt like it's a really tricky thing. Some agencies do it, but for me, it's a really tricky thing to verify proficiency and at what level, and how do we continue that training, and then how do we make sure that those people that speak that particular language are in the right space at the right time. So it's with our service area, with our diversity, it's really a challenging thing. So what we do is we use VEC, and I'll let Chief Russell talk more about that.
Yeah, Chief, I think this is a good question. We have a pretty large running area and a pretty diverse population that they don't necessarily always utilize English as a primary language. So it's something that we're dealing with on a daily basis, and our crews do pretty good navigating that. To answer the question, we do have a HIPAA-compliant translation service, and that is provided to us through VEC. If we encounter a patient that we need to speak to and we don't have the ability with somebody on the crew that speaks that language, or it's something that we can't accommodate, the request for that service does go through the dispatcher, and the dispatcher will connect us through that service with the patient and the translator, and that's kind of how we navigate that. VEC does a pretty good job most of the time of attempting to, prior to our arrival, connect the patient with that translator so that when our crews arrive, that's already in process and happening. But as we all know, that's not a perfect process either, and so sometimes we have to initiate that while we're in the patient's home to be able to get that translator on the line. So in addition to the VEC service, the person who asked the question listed a bunch of links to translation services that are also available. And these, when I looked through these and did a little bit of research, they're all good options to be able to communicate with patients who are not English speaking. I've also did a little bit of research working with Chief Ayers regarding the hospitals in the Valley, and they're kind of all over the place. They all use different translation services. These services vary from in-house translators that are full-time that they pay to be in the emergency room, to video conferencing services, to phone services similar to the one we use for VEC, that kind of connect those caregivers with the translator and the patient. But for us currently, to use a live translator in the field setting, talking with Chief Ascardi, who's our VEC liaison, we are encouraging the crews to use that VEC system because it's in place. We do currently pay for that as part of our VEC fees, and it's worked really, really well for us in the past. That being said, we do have a little bit of a gap, and I'm still trying to do some additional research with Chief Ascardi as far as the central dispatch with the Eagle Mountain crews. That's a little bit of a gap, and I don't have the education to speak on that currently, but I'm working on that and what that process is going to look like. In addition, Chief Ascardi was able to get those direct phone numbers for the translating service given to us from VEC, so that if we have a need where we just need to call that line directly, we will be able to do that. So in our October operations chiefs meeting, that'll be in the notes. We'll be able to include those phone numbers in the notes, give the BCs some direction on when to use that outside of the dispatch system. So as your chiefs come around for the October review of the ops chiefs notes, that'll be part of that packet.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Chief, last question. Hello, Chief, and thank you for answering this question. While digging into the UFA 2025 budget book, I found some confusion with respect to Tier 2 retirement benefits and 401k contributions. Page 359 states, quote, all full-time sworn employees that are in Tier 2 retirement system currently receive a contribution of 1.41% to their 401k account, as well as the employer pickup contribution as designated by URS for a total of 4%, end quote. In the glossary under retirement, the 401k contribution for Tier 2 firefighters is listed as 1.26%. My URS account shows no UFA 401k contributions after July 1st, 2024. If this 1.41% is no longer paid as a 401k contribution, it should not be included and counted as deferred compensation on the wage charts. The charts indicate that all 15 comparable agencies are covering the full cost of Tier 2 for their members, shown as 2.59% for 2024. The budget references a $405,000 URS decrease. It appears this decrease is a result of decreased benefits to Tier 2 employees by using 401k contributions designed to increase compensation to cover retirement benefits. Please help me understand. Is UFA making 401k contributions to Tier 2 firefighters? Why are there different 401k percentage rates listed in the budget book? Why is 1.41% 401k contribution listed as deferred compensation on entry-level comparable charts if it is not being paid? If the UFA is experiencing a decrease in URS costs, why has that funding not been reallocated to cover the increasing costs of the Tier 2 system and to continue the 401k contribution? Instead of using the 401k contribution designed and implemented to move firefighters closer to the top 3 position. When the Tier 2 system was improved in 2020, it made sense to use 2% of the 401k contribution to offset the increase in benefits. Does it make sense to reduce the 401k benefits, thus employee compensation, to maintain the retirement benefit? It would appear the result of using the 401k contribution to fund the Tier 2 system has resulted in a 4% decrease in compensation to Tier 2 employees when compared to other agencies. Thank you for taking the time to answer these questions.
There's a lot there. And I've got Kylie here to answer most of it. But what I'll say before she gets into it is that I appreciate the fact that they were in the budget book. And there were some errors. There were some in the glossary specifically. There were some definitions that didn't get updated, and she's going to talk about that. But I'll give it to you, and then I'll kind of interject where I need to.
Sounds good. Yeah, I do. I want to thank whoever was digging into the budget book. There were some errors in the glossary, and then even in just the benefits section that didn't get updated this go around. So those have been noted, and we will make those adjustments for next year's budget in the budget book. As far as the contributions, it is correct that we're no longer, if you're in the firefighter Tier 2 hybrid retirement plan, there is no longer the 401k contribution of that 1.41. With the rates increasing for our Tier 2 firefighters, that the 1.41 went away, but we did do a resolution where the employer did pick up the employee portion, which is that 4.73. So they have so UFA is paying the 4.73, which is really the employee pickup, and then the 14% is then is what we're contributing into their plan, and that's for the hybrid. And the hybrid is where there is a 401k option and the pension, so together, and that the rates did increase to fund that portion of it. If you are in the Tier 2 defined contribution, UFA contributes the 14%, and then we contribute the 4.73 in addition to that into the 401k. So let me just interject there. The Tier 2, whether you're in the hybrid or the defined contribution, the total contribution rate is exactly the same. It's 18.81%. Correct.
Right? And so, and that's the cost that UFA pays, and whether that's into a 401 or into the system is the same. It's just whatever path that the employee chose.
Yes.
So that that's important. There's a lot of numbers there,
Mm-hmm.
but the important thing to know is that the amount that is paid is 18.81% for both.
Correct.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So I hope that answers kind of that first piece of that. And the employee is right. We did see the budget book, there was the $405,000 decrease, but that was due to the fact that Tier 1 rates did decrease this year. So Tier 1 for the fiscal year 24-25, the firefighters was by 2%, public safety was by 0.5%, and the public employees was by 1%. So there was a decrease, and that was actually $498,933 in the estimated savings. However, due to the increase in the Tier 2, it came out to about approximately the $405,000. So that money has been reallocated, and so we're doing what was intended for that money to do. However, because the rates are changing and they increased and decreased, and how much is being contributed with COLA and all the other cost savings, it just costs more money to fund those. So it costs more money to fund the COLA. It costs money for the market and the merit increases. And then that makes the retirement contributions increase as well. But we are reallocating those funds.
Yeah, and I want to, again, interject here that the person that asked the question said it appears the $405,000 decrease is a result of decreased benefits to Tier 2 employees by using that contribution designed to increase compensation, which is not correct at all. That decrease came from Tier 1 and Tier 2 increased. The 405 was the result net of those two.
Correct.
And UFA is still paying the same amount for the Tier 2 employees.
Okay.
And then I believe the last one was the wage survey. And in the budget, those wage comparable tables are correct, because when we create the wage comparison charts, I use the current salary and benefits. So the 1.41 contribution was correct for the comparison. As going forward next year, it will be removed, and it has been removed because I've started that already. But we will also include in this year's comparison that 4.73% pickup instead of the 2.59. So,
Okay.
yeah. But I believe that kind of answers in a nutshell, a little globally, the question.
Yeah, and I think just again to recap it, it feels like, reading this question a couple of times, it feels like this person thinks that we took money away from them, or the system took money from them, and that, or increased their costs, and that's not the case. We are, like you mentioned, that the costs go up or down based on what is happening in the system of URS, and they are different for Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 is going to decrease, I think, for the next couple of years because we've met our unfunded liability. That was a big problem, which caused Tier 2 to even be in a system. Tier 2 has now started to go up because there's more people in there, and there's been higher than average COLAs over the last few years, and so that system goes up. And so we're trying to balance the overall cost, but the benefit to the employee is still the same and has been the same. It just costs us more. But the employee or pickup or employee pickup part is that we continue to cover that, where some agencies don't. So that's important to know.
Okay.
But there's a lot there. I know it's pretty confusing, but if there's more, if this person wants to call
For sure,
you or I or Tony, that we'd be more than happy to talk them through this.
Yes.
Through it.
Yep. And meet with them.
Okay. Thanks for coming in.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's a wrap on questions, Chief. But I know last Monday, I think it was the 26th, we had the UFSA Finance Committee meeting, and out of that came a little bit of news. You want to?
Yeah,
brief us?
I think it's important to talk about. We put little pieces in the minutes, but it's important for me to talk a little bit about it. And what happened is that was the meeting to start talking about the UFSA budget, the kind of the first budget meeting for UFSA, and part of that discussion was that we needed to discuss at what level would be the tax increase or proposed tax increase for 2025. So that's where I present needs for UFA as far as service delivery goes in relation to UFSA. So I presented the recommendation to increase staffing at Station 253 to a 4-handed crew and Station 107 to a 4-handed crew. Both of those together would be about a 12.5% tax increase just to make that staffing happen.
Okay.
If you remember, we still had the 12% tax increase, or about 12% from last year to get our fund balance back up to the 15% required number. So adding those two pieces together, we're looking at about a 23% tax increase, and that was what the meeting was about. The finance committee for UFSA gave the recommendation to start there at 23%, and then we'll continue the conversations with the full board, with the public meeting, and all of those things that happen between now and December when the budget's approved. The cool thing is that they were supportive of adding stations in Eagle Mountain and in Kearns, although for different reasons. And those two reasons are, in Kearns we're busy, and we're relying on West Jordan and West Valley to run the calls in that area. And when Kearns is out, it's pulling in Taylorsville or West Valley and West Jordan. So in Kearns, it's a call volume issue, where in Eagle Mountain, it's a growth and size issue. So our response times down there are not good enough to where I want them. They're not up to our standard because of the growth and the size of that community. So two different reasons, but the board supported, the committee rather supported both of those. Now, again, I want to reiterate that this is like the first step in a long process,
yep.
right? We still have to go and present to all the communities and say, this is why we're looking for a 23% tax increase on top of what we did last year, which was a 12. That's a big
So you'll be hitting city council meetings again?
Yep. Yeah, pretty much most of October and into November we'll be making those presentations to the councils. Obviously, the public is welcome there for input, but our job at the council is really just to report that that's what we're looking at and why we're doing it. And then sometime in December, there'll be a public hearing for all the communities or taxpayers to be able to come in and voice their opinion.
Okay.
And then the board votes on it or they don't. So, like I said, long process.
Yeah.
But I think that both of those units are needed, and I've had station visits now where they're like, well, we're mandatorying 2 medics a day. How are we going to staff another 2 engines? And my plan for that is to start the first one, and I don't know if it's going to be Eagle Mountain or Kearns, but the first one will be when this next. When the spring camp graduates, so it'll be sometime in July, and then the second one would be after the fall camp of 2025, so sometime in the end of 2025. So although the tax, if approved, the tax increase will go in January. Yeah, we won't be able to staff it until July and January.
Okay.
Of maybe 2026.
Gotcha.
So. But we do. I mentioned earlier in the questions that we have 3 camps going on back to back to back, and so we're hoping to get the ambulance staffed in Kearns, right, and then those 2 units through those 3 and 4 different camps.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're working through that right now, but really happy that the board, or that committee rather, supported the recommendation, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay. A lot of work this fall.
Yeah. It's going to be fun.
Well, thanks, Chief. I'm Niall Easton. That's been Questions for the Chief. Appreciate the questions. Keep them coming, and we'll see you next month.